All right, ladies and gentlemen, glad to have y'all with us. We're going to get started with this Bro Talk discussion, and I think objectively, just feeling the rhythm of what's been happening in the conference, we thought about actually making the experience that we've developed in an online setting. We wanted to share that, just basically have a discussion about one of the topic areas that when we did introduce it to our forum, it just seemed to spark so much in the hearts of men. And so our hope is that we can represent how this might be replicated in organizations and ministries, churches, wherever you find yourself in space where there are men that are struggling with issues that either instinctively or maybe even from specific training, you're aware that there are people around us that need help. So my name is Al Blue. I am a native of Syracuse, New York, prior military. I've been in San Antonio 34 years. Next weekend, next Saturday, will be my 34th wedding anniversary. My wife and I got married on Labor Day weekend in 1988, and we were both at decision-making, a turning point. I was active duty Air Force, and I just really felt my calling to ministry. I separated from active duty service and planned on staying in the DC area. But a year later, I found myself in San Antonio, wondering, God, what are you doing? But I did know that the call to ministry was something that was in my heart for my life path. And a few years later, we started a local church here in San Antonio, northeast side, called Family Life Ministries. In a couple of weeks, I am turning that church over to my 30-year-old son, and my wife and I are going to continue working in the community, and the agenda of mental health and awareness and access to resources is top of mind for us. So this Bro Talk piece was such a difference maker for us that when we talked to Doug about it and others, we felt like there was a feeling like maybe there's something here that might start another Bro Talk conversation or guy talk or whatever the spaces are. We need spaces where men can come together and understand what's happening in their lives that might be related to mental health. Dr. Andy Gray and I was in the background, y'all, listening to Trauma Talk. Every Monday night, my wife and Dr. Andy and Dr. Sunita, they were on Zoom with, I don't know, there were 40, 50 people from around the country, most of them local, but friends and family. They were gathering and they were digging into these mental health conversations. I'd be over in the next room, listening to Sports Center, and not really paying attention of it, but it kept there were little thoughts that kept resonating with me. Wait, that's affecting people I know. That's what I deal with pastorally. These are people that I meet at the altar that are saying, I'm not just feeling bad about the loss of my job or my business or this experience, but I feel ineffective. I feel like I can't work. When you can't function normally, that's when there is a real issue that has affected your livelihood. Can't get out of bed, all of those kinds of things. And Dr. Andy and I just started talking, and in all honesty, my wife said, you know what? We need a forum for men. And so, it was so easy for us to find the space that we could start talking. And so we wanted to share some of what the formulation of Bro Talk was like. Billy Lavender is an elder in our church. I met Billy 27, 28 years ago. I've seen the transformation of his life, his marriage. He's an elder in our church. And maybe like me, I think he was probably in the other room and his wife was on some of the training. And you know what happens, man. You hear things that they really strike a chord in you, that this isn't something that you just need to get the information on, but you need to act on. So almost a year ago, that every Monday night trauma talk setting, they gave us 2 of those Mondays to begin having what we now call Bro Talk. So we took the summer off, June, July, and August of this year, but for 9 months, every second and fourth Monday, men from the local area, some from as far away as Washington, D.C., and Dallas, Texas, and other places, we would meet and we would talk about issues that were affecting men. And it was really enlightening and empowering. We're planning on resuming this fall. But Dr. Andy, let's give a little, when we started thinking about why we needed to have Bro Talk, I'm like, hey man, guys can just go to Trauma Talk. But we understood something because in the months that, Andy, that you guys are doing Trauma Talk, there really was a lack of male presence. And there's certainly, if there were men that were showing up, they weren't participating. They might be on screen under their wife's name, or they might be on, but you'd never see their face, or they wouldn't ask a question. That lack of male presence in the mental health conversation was disturbing to us.
And then sometimes we'll see them just kind of loitering in the background too.
I apologize, I came in a little late. What are we leading with today?
What are we leading with?
Yeah, what are we speaking of?
So we're talking about a forum for men to discuss mental health issues.
Okay.
We started something called Bro Talk that we did twice a month on Zoom.
Okay.
Started that a year ago. So now we're just explaining how did we get that conversation or that forum, how did it begin?
The forum.
Yeah, how did the forum for men to discuss mental health begin? So I was making the point that there, in the discussions, I'm a pastor, so I know that there.
Oh, this is under God?
Not so much.
Okay.
I was just saying that as my vocation, I recognize that there were men in, whether it was in church or in the community, there were men that were having mental health issues, but they didn't even know that what the anger or the isolation or whatever the problems were, they didn't know that those were symptoms of mental health challenges or problems.
Yeah, naturally.
So that's where out of this other forum, we begin to have a space for men to come and be safe, be anonymous if they wanted to, but just to either listen and maybe at a point ask a question, or in the previous session, we were talking about a young man who's 40 years old that a year ago he was living in his car. He was suicidal. He was beyond ideation. He was seriously considering it. And because of the Bridges to Care training, I knew in 2 minutes. And with all this other, I've been with my seminary experience and pastoral experience, I think I might have missed it, guys.
I think I might have.
But the Bridges to Care training, in 2 minutes, I said, hey man, are you thinking about killing yourself? Because that's one of the things that you train us to, we learn asked the hard question, are you thinking about killing yourself? He said, yes. My next question was, do you have a plan? He said, yes. And that, within 24 hours, he was talking to Dr. Punjabi, Dr. Sunita. Shortly after that, Dr. Andy picked him up and we had him in care. That was incredible for us. As a church, with we don't have therapists in our congregation. We don't have psychiatrists. We just have, what we've leaned on traditionally as the Word of God and our hope and our faith. But we recognized immediately, because of that training, wait, there's another step that we can take that could be meaningful in this person's development. So, yes, sir.
Yes, sir. I just wanted to touch on the trigger happy man growth talk there. So I guess feeding off what we had heard earlier, it was more, based on on God and Mother Mary and Jesus, maybe a Christianity point of view for, mental health issues such as yours and I. I guess what I'm saying is maybe there could be some stronger communication as far as direction and striving and driving and wanting in the will of a man that wants to get better and faster and stronger, all under God. So I guess what I'm saying is in this Bro Talk, if we could maybe have a happier, healthier, more confident exchange as far as success of the heart, mind, body, and spirit, under God. I guess, maybe the healing would come from our words and choosing them wisely, rather, and being a little more thoughtful and considerate of people and what they may be going through at certain times. I guess with this exchange or whatever, I would ask if we could, speak a little cleaner and happier
Sure.
and healthier, whether instead of focusing and making the mind head towards a different, dark, down,
Sure.
haunted, let's see if we can, high, happy, healthy, wealthy, successful. And I just wanted to share that with you.
Okay.
You're a pastor?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I am a pastor, but our objective really wasn't to promote religion per se, but it was really to have a conversation that started in the faith community. And the reason for that was the faith community, people know us.
Oh, yeah.
People know their churches, their parishes, they know their synagogue, they know the areas of the places in their communities where they can go and get help, and there is that trust factor still exists. But our concern was that there wasn't much being voiced from the faith community that said we advocate for not just your spiritual well-being, but your mental health is as important to God as anything else. And so for the church to begin to be engaged in that conversation was a breakthrough moment for us. And so what we're doing now is just talking about how it got started, and we're actually going to take you through one of what it would be like to be in a session with us. Dr. Andy is going to talk about men and what it means to be a trigger-happy man, and how that then can lead to conversation and dialogue. Yes, sir.
Yes, David Davis, West Fair, Texas. Do you feel that in the minority community that this conversation between the men, is increasing in terms of discussing about mental health, particularly in the minority community, or do you feel as if it is staying constant to where it's at, today, or has it decreased in terms of people getting this, not only this information? I'm trying to get a gauge and understanding within the minority community. Are we talking about this more? This is a big stigma. I mean, even in my congregation,
Sure.
I'm a trustee of my church. I mean, we don't even talk about mental health.
Yeah.
So I just would like to hear your perspective.
Well, to the first part of your question, is there an increase in communities of faith as it relates to mental health? I would say absolutely yes. Now, given how much progress is still on the road before us, we do have a long way to go. But I think, it's incumbent upon church leaders the voice of the pastor or the priest or whoever that person might be, that person's voice is what really begins to, speak to the issue. And so in San Antonio, for example, leaders are becoming more and more aware that, the church needs to have an active role in the conversation, in the incorporation of its own ministry motto. There needs to be an incorporation of a mental health component. And really, truthfully, we preach it all the time.
Right.
We just don't say that this is mental health, but
Right.
it's there. It's so interwoven in Scripture, but the plain talk, the breaking of the stigma starts with the leaders. Dr. Andy.
Yeah, and I'd say to that, to your question too, that Bishop Blue and I come from different congregations, and in my congregation, I'm probably one of the few that are not a person of color, and our conversation there is very frank about mental health. And I think that that's something that I would say, in piggybacking off of what Bishop has said, is that, yeah, I think it's increasing, but it's still a long way to go because we have to destigmatize this. And I'd often tell people, whenever we talk, and we talk about this in Road Talk, listen, if your foot hurts, you're going to go see a doctor.
That's right.
For a little while because you can't walk right. It affects everything you do. Well, your mind, how much more important is your mind than your foot? I'm not saying that your foot's not useful. I'm not saying that you don't need your foot. But in comparison, your mind is, you can get a prosthetic for a foot,
Right.
but you can't get a prosthetic for a mind. And so what we need for us to be able to have these very frank conversations, destigmatize it. It's not, like Pastor V said, it's not, it's not what's wrong with you, it's what's happened to you, and try to address these things and get away from this where you're weak, especially among guys. That's one of the things that we like so much about Bro Talk, is that it's a place for men to be able to talk where you're not going to have to worry so much about someone else thinking that you're weak. And so to that end, I think that that's one of the things that I enjoy about it. So I would say that it's on an incline, but because of the stigmatization of it among men and then of people of color, man, that's something that we're just going to have to keep pushing through and keep saying over and over and over and over in a consistent message. That's my vantage point. And then to this gentleman's conversation, a question here real quick too. When we talk about, part of what we do in Bro Talk is to talk about mental health issues. We don't shy away from a theological discussion or from a faith-based approach to those things, but we're having them based upon, a statistics and a data-driven conversation about mental health.
Can I just add a follow-up
Please,
question?
sure.
It sounds like Bro Talk is a great platform to be able to have, even leaders be able to attend to get this information. On this particular platform, does the conversations lead to, or is there any discussions with even like corporate partners that are, what? Let me quit trying to measure my words. Let me just go ahead and ask the question.
Sure.
If I am a CIO, CTO, chief level officer at a company, and I now start talking about my mental health and my mental health issues, how does that affect my standing and position in my company? Does this platform talk about how, I can start to address that even in my company, because I am looked at as a leader.
Sure.
But then now to sit here and say that I'm a minority leader and not have mental health issues, how does that, is there ideas, suggestions, ways that I can go ahead and address that into my company, sort of corporation? I don't know if the platform does something to that effect.
You want to tackle that one? We'll shift all the microphones over to the doctor.
So I would say, first off, I would say that, there's a way to lead people, and leading from rank is probably not always the best way. Rock, scissor, rank is probably not a great way to do things. But I think that in terms of leadership within an organization, 1 in 20 people throughout the United States, 1 in 5 people, sorry, throughout the United States has a diagnosable mental illness or diagnosed with mental illness. 1 in 5. 20%, 50 million people in the United States. And those were probably conservative numbers, because like if you ask the CDC for their numbers, they're going to tell you that those are what's reported, but the actual maybe 1.5 to 2.5 times higher. So let's just say at minimum it's 50 million people in the United States. If you're in an organization, that means that you have 100 people, 1 in 5, so 20 people have a mental illness. That doesn't mean that you're not immune. But what you can communicate is, even though I have this mental illness, I still am able to lead, but I still need resources. It doesn't make me weak, it empowers me. And that's what we're trying to do, I think, from Bro Talk, is to let you know that, the kind of a Lone Ranger stuff is not always the best. Even as a leader, that's not the best way to lead. Jump in when you want here.
Yeah.
It's not a great way to lead. So what we want to do is create a community and let them know, even from a CIO or a C-level executive, that hey, this is what's happened in our communities. This is what we can expect here. If that's you, let's get you some help. There's no shame. There's no stigma. That doesn't mean that you're broken. Doesn't mean that you're less. But let's work with it. And if you got one, that's fine. We can still continue to work. I mean, that would be my opinion. And I know I'm getting jazzed up, so I'm going to stop.
Yes, sir.
I'm just wondering, you guys, do you have a PowerPoint? And then
We do.
Then we're going to have a discussion afterwards?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to specifically
So we can see the
address.
PowerPoint, and then we can have all this
Well,
robust discussion.
Yes, but the PowerPoint is speaking specifically to a topic that we addressed in one of our Bro
As an
Talks.
example.
There you go.
So you wanna dig in? And thank you for,
Did we answer your question? Did you have another one?
No, you did.
but I would say to this, I think being a leader gives you also that, you're responsible. Because if you as a leader have mental health issues or challenges that may or may not be in that, you owe it to yourself to find out. And then as a leader, then you've got others that you're leading. And so what if part of your leading your organization is leading your staff to better mental wellness? How much more effective and productive could your team, your company, your branch of the department be? So that's the way we look at it. And I thought as a pastor that if my congregation heard me talking about the grief I experienced when my parents passed away, that it would help them to know that that's not a weakness. People needed to hear that. And it often is a greater blessing, David, that when people hear their leaders say, man, for you to say that you were really down over that loss or that experience, that really helped me.
Right.
And maybe then people on your team might say, well, where can I get help? That's the objective, is to introduce people to sources of information, language that helps them understand, as my wife was saying earlier, and I say it now, it's not what's wrong with you, it's what happened to you. I learned that in a component of the Bridges to Care training, which I felt so compelled just sometime having coffee with my wife. I'm like, wait, I need this training.
Right.
And then other leaders in our church, they had taken the training before I did. So here I've got, 15, 20 leaders. They're going through the training, and I can hear in them hope. I can hear in them an aspiration. This can really change our ministry. And I was behind the curve. I should have been out in front, leading the way. And now I'm here in a forum like this because I think it's my responsibility as a community leader to now echo this sentiment to my colleagues, my fellow pastors and leaders in our city.
Can we touch on the stigma that we speak of? I've heard
Yes, sir.
Stigma used a few times. I was wondering, can we touch on the matter, or what
We
is
will, yes, sir. I promise you we will.
If we would.
Yeah, Andy, let's walk through a little bit of this trigger-happy discussion, and then we'll come back to your questions, sir.
The general format, and I'm loud enough that you guys can hear me without the mic, right?
We can.
All right. too many years of being out on the street talking with homeless people. I can project my voice, I think, loud enough. Yeah, unsheltered, yeah, thank you. All right, so really when we're talking, what we do is, it'll start off with a presentation that generally lasts somewhere around 15, 20, depending upon the topics, maybe 30 minutes at most. And then what we do is we open up the floor for questions so that someone can ask, and oftentimes we'll spend another 30 or 45 minutes answering questions going back and forth among us from the guys that attend Bro Talk. And as Bishop Blue said, we'll have people from here to DC and Houston and all over the place, so it's a pleasure to do that. All right, so let's talk about trigger-happy men. Triggers. If I'm talking about a trigger-happy guy, I'm not talking about this kind of trigger. For those of us that are a certain age, maybe we know what that is. But we're talking about, the areas, the switches, the buttons that get pushed. It's, anything that's, even something in an environment can trigger us to have an emotional response, and sometimes a physical response, a smell or a sight or something like that, really get on us. And before we know it, we're not even mean to have a response, and our body is already reacting. And this is because the body keeps score. It's the name of a book, and it's a good one. Your body has a way of remembering these events. In fact, your body is built that way. One of the things that we see is that, your brain stores its memory in a place called your hippocampus. And that's kind of a black and white. My first television was a black and white, right? It was a little bitty black and white, 11-inch, 13-inch TV. Probably not, stop laughing at me. Probably not as big as my computer screen. And he's older than I am, y'all. So anyway, so as we talk about it, your hippocampus stores things in black and white. But your amygdala, now that's color television. That is emotion, because that's what it's meant to do. What's weird, or what's weird, but it's way interesting, is that, so you have the black and white, but you have the color, so then the amygdala, the emotion portion of your brain, in the limbic system, it adds color to things. That's why you can remember things so vividly. One of the reasons for that, and talking about people that have had trauma, is that it seems to be that the brain is geared to remember those things so they can go back over and see what lessons you can learn. What lesson can you learn from something? And when that process gets, I'm going to use the word hijacked, when that process gets hijacked, and now where the brain is spinning on it, trying to see what else it can learn over and over again, you get the body reacting to an external or even an internal trigger. So this can cause these emotional reactions that you didn't even intend for. You weren't even anticipating. You weren't even ready to have. But because you've had an event that now elicited this emotion from your amygdala, which is its job, the flight, fight, or freeze, right? That's where you start to get all those things from. That is what's happening. Your body is getting ready to prepare itself to tackle whatever it is. But what if you don't want it to tackle those things? How do we deal with these triggers? And so this is based upon the circumstances, right? And what may be a trigger to you may not be a trigger to me. And ladies, y'all don't have to forgive me because we talk with guys, right? And we know that in our relationships, there can be some triggers, right? Now guys, we need to be fair. How often do we hit that little, like in the movies, something to auto-detonate, they have the little button that's got the glass over it, and they flip the switch, and the glass pops up, and you got the big red button to push. Yeah, like the movie, yeah, push to detonate. Our wives can push our buttons, but we know well what buttons we can push in our wives. And I think, y'all women, y'all can't take this out of here now, okay? I think we do that sometimes just for fun.
I don't look at me. I'm not responding to anything.
Oh, I forgot about that.
I'm on video.
Oh, I'm a video.
I can't confirm or deny.
Right. Okay, so let me say, I heard that happened, right? I'm aware of it, not that I ever do.
There you go.
It's been told to me. Okay, so let's go next one here. So let's talk a little bit more. So why do we get triggered? What kind of things cause us to get triggered? Maybe you come from an environment where a sight or a smell of something reminds you of a bad past experience. Or maybe you're trying to live your life one way, and now you find yourself in an environment that reminds you of the other way that you left, and now you automatically start remembering. It's like a flood of memory and emotion, and you start to feel a certain way. And often before you can get to it, you remember what it felt like, or what it smelled like, or what something tastes like, and now you've tried so hard to get those things out of your memory, and now they come flooding back. So different environments can do these things. Different experiences. All of us have different experiences. All of us are to some extent a product of our environment. So we need to know that our different experiences can trigger us. So Bishop was talking about a gentleman that one of these gentlemen that I counseled with as a therapist, and I was talking with him, and as I was working through some of the things that was going on, one of the problems he had was law enforcement.
Right.
If a law enforcement guy came up and started talking, it didn't matter if there was anything wrong, just say hi, he immediately started to get real tense and real defensive. And so what you found out was that through talking with him, he had a bad experience when he was young, and now he thinks that, or his thought was then, that it was always going to be a bad experience, and someone was always out to, a law enforcement person was always out to treat him badly. So those kind of experiences are something that we need to be aware of. And listen, I've had some pretty different experiences with law enforcement, even though I was a paramedic for a long time. But we still need to be aware, particularly with people of color, that they may not have had the same experience with law enforcement as we have. And we can't tell them that that is wrong. Their experience is their experience. And more to the point, that experience frames the reality of a person until proven otherwise.
So Dr. Andy, and this is how we roll. So right here, you guys are listening to this. Can you think of something that triggers you? All the way in the back. Ma'am, you shaking your head, yes. Tell us one of your triggers.
One of my triggers is music. If I hear certain songs,
Uh-huh.
I'll start to get emotional.
Okay.
So I have to be aware of that. Dates trigger me, and I have to be aware of that. I can look at a calendar and know why I'm feeling a certain way
Well,
because of a specific event that happened.
okay.
So that'll be a trigger for me.
Someone else.
Maybe like like you mentioned, or he touched on, maybe like a traumatic event or like a painful memory. Triggers.
Okay. And so,
That's good.
anyone else? A trigger? Yes, sir.
4th of July, fireworks.
Oh, yeah.
4th of July fireworks.
Yeah.
What does that trigger for you, if I may ask? Good feelings?
Gunshots, bad feelings.
Okay.
4th of July, I go to bed about 7 o'clock at night. I don't hear no fireworks.
Understood. Okay. Yes, sir.
Images,
Yeah.
certain phraseologies.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's good.
The N-word used to be a trigger for me.
Okay.
I went to
So
an
racial-
all-white school and used to hear the N-word and I'd be fighting.
Okay.
It's terrible.
Yes, sir.
I had two. One was my foster dad. I grew up as a foster kid, and I remember in this particular foster family, he was military retired, Purple Heart, and Mr. King, his name is Mr. King. Mr. King would have these triggers. So whenever our foster mom would cook dinner, all the foster kids, we'd get at the table in the kitchen, we'd sit down. Well, one time I scooted the chair back, and it made a noise that resembled to him as a tank. The squeak, the squeak of that, and it triggered. He jumped up and like, you know, freaked out, and we were all like, we're kids, so we were kind of like, oh, what did we do? But it was because we scooted the chair back.
So that sound.
That sound was a trigger to him. I don't know if you could relate to that, sir, but.
Did you keep on doing it?
No.
Now, let me say something here too as we do this. One of our rules as we do Bro Talk is what is said in Bro Talk stays in Bro Talk,
Yeah.
right? So this has to be a safe space for everybody to know what someone talks about here. This is from their life experience. This is something that's dear to them. And so we want to make sure that whatever we say stays here.
Judgment-free, confidentiality.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you, gentlemen. And lastly, one personal experience was if I watch certain movies, certain scenes in movies can make me teary-eyed because of the emotional impact of that scene and how it resonates with something that I resonate with, if that makes any sense.
Okay. No, absolutely. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
I missed out a little bit, I know where y'all are going. With the triggers, I got diagnosed a while back in my younger years. And so something I learned though with my hospitalizations was like for whatever reason in the mental health hospitals, they would play like this like news. Like the news station, it was like really like crime, and while you're trying to get well, that was like counter like health for me. And so I had to be really coming out of the hospital, just living, you know, I don't watch news to this day, like really.
Okay.
I just catch like maybe bits and pieces of it,
Huh.
but it was just like the whole 24/7 we were there. It was like
Yeah. Anyone else? A trigger? Sir, ma'am, anyone want to share?
Smells trigger things too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, smells are provocateurs of emotion.
Can people, the presence of people be a trigger?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Because, you know, if you see somebody, you know, if you see somebody who has just been a hot mess expressed, and this person is just, Lord have mercy. But seeing that person just triggers just bad vibes. if you
Hold
will.
on, I'm gonna use that in my next sermon. Hot mess express, that's going in.
For lack of better expression.
No, I like it, actually.
Well, for me, you know, I grew up with a stepfather. We had a difficult relationship. So sometimes the way some people say something triggers me based on what was said to me. So, you know, I have to guard against that because I can, you know, I get upset real quick. Just based on the way the tone someone uses.
So folks, for the sake of time, I mean, there's a lot more to this information. We'd love to get this to you. Can we send this like via email? If you'd like to get it, we'll just send it to you, the whole PowerPoint.
Thank you.
But we start here, and sometimes this is as far as we get.
Yeah.
Because, you know, the responses of individuals, if someone is in the room or on Zoom that night, if someone is there who's experienced domestic violence, or if someone's experienced a different kind of abuse, substance use or abuse, there are things that might trigger them toward a negative behavior or relapse. These three explanations, environments, experiences, even our belief and our value system, there are things that happen that either, you know, positively or negatively influence us. What we've seen and what people like, you know, professionals like Dr. Andy is able to help individuals understand. And sir, what's your name again?
Cliff.
So, and Cliff, you're a trainer, am I correct?
I'm a clinical social worker, but I'm a trainer for NAMI. A
Yeah.
state trainer.
So what this kind of skill set is, it helps individuals to do is make people like us, just we're in the community, we're in the workforce, and so on, but we're learning the language that sometimes we don't realize that, you know, I'm a type A type of manager, supervisor, but I've learned over time that everybody isn't a type A. And I can't be that pound the desk, you know, get it done. That doesn't always work across your staff. At certain times that I might be, you know, pounding the table, that pounding the table might remind someone of a parent that was overly abusive. And now I'm getting poor performance. And I'm wondering, hey, what's his problem? His problem may be that some of my actions are triggering memories of unresolved anger experiences, etc. Yes, sir.
In discussing what you just talked about right now, how do you address people who sit there and say, now what you're asking an individual to do is to adjust their behavior for those individuals that have these various triggers? So now you're asking that one individual to sit there and basically acquiesce to every individual's trigger. That means if I have to talk to you softly, I have to use these words, I have to be this way, I have to do these things, I have to basically change who I am now to ensure that I accommodate the triggers of the mass here, to the point where we now take that person and across the board have them be a passive, I'm going to use another, buzzword, non-aggressive individual that is going to just
Mr. Fortune 500, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm just asking.
I think that's a great question, David, and I think as we are becoming better resource and we understand what people are dealing with, what it helps us to do is be more effective. It doesn't necessarily mean, because I haven't changed in my mannerism, I haven't changed in my leadership style per se, I still want to get it done, I'm still results oriented, but I just understand that if I'm dealing with this gentleman right here, he and I may be able to say, hey, let's work 12-hour shifts until it gets done, but there may be others that because of their family dynamics or other circumstances, it is important for me as a leader to be sensitive to the fact that everyone may not be in the same place, and so
different
If it's going to help you become a more effective leader, then it's worth making the adjustment.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, but do you have to change for every person? No, that's extreme. But I do think that as we understand, the more we understand that there are experiences, there's certain people, man, you just can't yell at them.
Exactly.
You just can't, and it doesn't mean that they're a poor worker or that they don't fit your team. I think in getting to know people and we understand, okay, it takes a while. Everybody isn't going to tell you, hey, I was abused.
Right.
So, it does take some massaging those places to be able to effectively. So here and then.
No, by all means, this gentleman.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Well, I think it has helped me tremendously, therapy, but also feedback. Having been a manager and a supervisor of other groups, when people say, well, Cliff, do you realize sometimes the way you come across is aggressive? Your tone, Cliff. People don't know that you're really a nice person inside, because when you come across, and that's great feedback for me as a leader, as a person who wants to be effective getting work done, that, oh, I do come across that way sometimes. Oh, is that the way I really want to come across? No. I want them to know that I really do care, but I do care about getting the work done.
That's good.
But I know that my tone, some people say, hey, you come across as an angry, aggressive black person, Cliff. Okay. Some things I can change, some things I can ameliorate, but it's good feedback for me to know. And sometimes it helps me to change my behavior and I can get better results. Because I do come across sometimes.
I think that we all have that the ability to come across that way, so it definitely makes sense. We should be aware.
Yes, sir.
Oh,
Yes.
And also too, like with relationships, I'm 35, and dating, that's been the area of improvement for me, because I often, because of my values and upbringing and different things that I've experienced, I can, be very, like I have this phrase, he mentioned phraseology, like I have this, whenever I want to get my significant other to really understand, so that what I say is not misunderstood or miscommunicated, I use this phrase that I kind of took from Obama. He says, let me be clear. So,
And how does that work out for you?
Does that trigger her? Let me be clear. She says.
How does that work with your significant other? I've seen how that could backfire.
I try not to use it unless I really don't want to be misunderstood or really want to be, you know, and the way that he says it, and the way that it hears it, so I use that when I need to, is when I really want to make myself clear, you know, let me be clear. And then,
I want to say something else about David's question too, is that people learn in different ways. There's not just one type of learner, right? There's kinesthetic, there's auditory, there's visual,
Right.
and sometimes you have a meld of those. So as a teacher or as an instructor of anything, you have to be aware of how people learn, and you can't just present something in one format because that person may not receive that format. So then in talking about changing our approach, it doesn't mean that I'm having to change who I am. It just means I'm altering what I'm doing so that everybody can get the benefit of it. And I hope I'm not pronouncing his name wrong, but I had a conversation years and years ago with Mark Wittig, and he said that he had people that worked for him, and he had them take this like inventory, and outside of their door or their cubicle or whatever, it had what the results were, so that when he went in to talk to that person, he knew this is how they were, so that he could communicate. Did that make him a weak leader? I think opposite. I think that was a very strong leader, because he knew how best to communicate with a person, so that the let me be clear is, I'm communicating on a wavelength that you can receive me, and so that I can get the job done, because at the end of the day, the mission is the mission, and that's what's most important, I think. So,
and to your point, on that note, and I want to say this because I want to become a life coach, a certified life coach, to work with like foster youth and young adults and stuff. So this is good for me, but this is why I feel like it's so important for these people who have these triggers to get healed and to get resolved, because they bring. It's one thing that I have to adjust my approach as a leader by all means, but it's also their responsibility to, if they know that if they're aware that they have these areas that need to be healed and these triggers, it's a part of accountability, responsibility on their part to be aware of.
yes, your own triggers.
So that they can know that it's not, they can receive it in the spirit in which it's given, and that they understand that it's not in any negative or mean way. It's, you know, can you kind of speak to that?
Yeah, so, you know, I would say that, and we can't, it's hard to be responsible for another person, because
Right.
we're ultimately meant to be truthful with everyone. Sometimes being responsible for me is enough of a job, right? And so, but what I can do for me is I can exercise extreme ownership of the things that are within my control. And if I'm communicating with someone and it seems like they're not getting it, then, you know, maybe I adjust my way of doing it, or say, you know, how can I help? You know, how can I help this make? It seems like I'm not communicating really in a way that I'm really getting through. So help me out. How can I do this? And again, I don't think that that's a show of weakness. I think that that's a show of strength. Listen, I'm here for you. This is the job. We want to get this done. This is the task. I'm here for you. You're not alone. You're not by yourself. You're important to me because I'm asking you, how can I help you? And so I think in terms of that is, but there is an onus on an individual person to know that. But a person will only recognize, psychologically, a person may only recognize that they have a trigger if they know it's a trigger. Because they may be brought up in an environment where they don't see that as a trigger until someone goes, oh, wait a minute, slow down, pump the brakes just a bit. How did that offend you? I'm sorry, please forgive me if I offend you, but how did what I said offend you? And then now you get the conversation, and I think that's even great, because now you and I get to have a one-on-one conversation where I learn something about you, you learn something about me, and we start to forge a bond that now that we know that we can talk to each other in a way that's constructive and that builds a sense of community and togetherness. And I think that's my thing. So one of the things that, and I'll get to you, sir, one of the things I want to make sure I say is that, because I know we're getting low on time, right?
We are.
Is that as a therapist, I don't open wounds that I can't close. So, all right, so when we do bro talking, I don't think we're going to get very far. I wanted to get to to a little bit of this. When we do it on the nights, we don't open up wounds we can't close. If we're going to open up something and then someone's having difficulty, we will get to how do you adjust, how do you compensate. We want to, to foster these compensatory mechanisms that are productive and not maladaptive or bad coping mechanisms. So I want to get there, but just so you know, well, heck, we ain't got to what to do. Just sometimes, some nights it's like this, where we're getting to what to do in the last 10 or 15 minutes because we have so much conversation. And sometimes we're talking with guys after that, or we're saying, hey, look, if you got to go at this time, it's fine. And if you want to hang out, we're still going to be here and talk with you. That's generally how we handle this sometimes too. Sir, you had a question?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Touching on what we had been discussing earlier, listening, I'm grabbing what I can when I can. Going through seminars and school and what have you, in different relationships and different, maybe educational settings. Yes, these are triggered emotions that I'm looking at here, and then we're focused on anger, rage, sadness, and fear. And I've heard of triggered emotions going toward anger, rage, sadness, and fear. And I guess what I'm looking for is more like a resolution or a solution.
Let's get
We're recognizing anger. I'm looking right at it. We're looking at anger. We're looking at rage, unhappiness, maybe some pain. And I guess what's most important is, yes, that we recognize and touch on, the hurt or the pain that we've been through, but more importantly, what can we do to get us out of there? What can we do to focus on happiness, on health and wealth, and recovery, feeling better. I pass by that house and I get that feeling every time I pass by that house, and it just doesn't feel that good. We see, maybe we see an image on a computer or a TV, and it brings back that hurt, that pain, that feeling of not feeling good. So yes, in life we're gonna deal with things of that nature. What can we do to get to a happier, healthier place? A resolution, a solution, and how can we transition transgression? How can we work our way out of there and start focusing on recovery of our mind?
Great question. So let's do that in these two slides. Where I was going with this was to lead to, a lot of times whenever we have triggers, they correspond to some unmet need. Something that's going on that from an experience that has made us feel less than a person, or there's some other unmet need often that we are that we have had an encounter with that we can't express, or that, again, what's happened to us. And so sometimes the acceptance, or, do you have control over your own person? Who are you to, can I exercise this control? Maybe it's a need of love or safety, and there's a lot of these different things. Being liked, being needed, people, I had a bumper sticker that I liked, and it said, 10 fingers suck, because I can only count to 7, right? And so people talk about count to 10, and I'd be like, man, what are you? It must be nice for you to brag. I mean, I have an unmet need that I need 3 fingers. I don't know what it is, but they're talking about that, there's some kind of unmet need. Well, for me, that was because everybody looked at me and often said this, is that you're broken, you're less than a person, you're weak. And so those are things that I had to be aware of and triggers, because people make prima facie judgments. And so for me, that was a lot of these things, unmet needs, being liked, being needed, acceptance, attention, love, safety. All of these were things that at some point in time, for example, that I struggled with. And I know that we all struggle with. So how do we handle these things after we've been triggered? So let me go to this one. Let's kind of get there. If you'll slide for me. Come on. Here we go. There, yes. So listen, first thing we do, change your focus. Change your focus. What happens when we've been triggered? Well, now you've had something happen that's triggered an emotional response, triggered a bad memory, triggered the longing that you had to be accepted. The longing that you had to be able to count to 10 and not have to figure out some other, without taking off your shoes, in my case. Whatever it is whatever that longing triggered would be something that you do. Change your focus, because the amygdala portion of your brain, where you get the emotions, part of the emotions, that is really hard for your frontal lobe, where your executive function's at, to go. If it's like having a baby in a room full of adults. That screaming baby will drown out all the adults in a room, one child, right? And that's kind of the way that I explain how the amygdala works. is it gets so loud, it drones out the frontal lobe and the executive function. So change your focus. Now that this has happened, find something else to think about. Find something else to look at. Find something else to see. You had a question?
No, I just wanted to add to that. I agree completely because I remember hearing something that said that what you focus on, how does it go? If anybody can help me, it's something to the effect that what you focus on is what you give power to.
Yes.
And what you
That's good.
feed, what you nourish. And, but if you, yeah, so.
That's good. Good.
Well, I was going to say that, you know, this is kind of how we work through to get to a point where we're talking about solutions. We don't always get there in every session because sometimes just the fact that people are talking, that's one of the objectives. We want to break the silence. We want people, in particular men, to be able to say, this angers me, or this makes me feel this way, or I have these experiences. So when we can, we want to, the forum for us is just a place where men can come and say, that's on my mind, or that bothers me.
If I could stop you, there you go. If I could stop you there, I guess when we choose to spend our day or scene of our life, at work, at school, our hobby, watering the yard, washing dishes, when we choose to spend each day focused on positivity, happiness, health, and wealth, that like he said, that's what we feed, that's what we nourish, that's what we look for, that's what we gravitate towards. So I guess why would we spend a forum or a classroom setting focused on the opposite, or negativity, or down, or the glass is half empty?
Some people aren't aware. They're not aware
So true.
that problem is affecting them.
Yes.
They don't know. So sometimes introducing people to language, new language, helps them to understand, oh, so that's why I snap. You know, if someone slams the door, that triggers that. People understand, my brother. So that's one of the reasons that we need discussions. And our hope is that we could find maybe a space where we can have conversations. It'd be great if is it Rudy?
Yes.
Yeah, Rudy, it would be great if you could start a discussion with people maybe that you work with. And you might just be solution-oriented in your discussion. Yeah. That would be great.
Yeah.
You know, if people just want answers, they come to you. But if people don't know what's wrong with them, it's hard to discover answers when you don't know the question. So our objective was to create a place where people could come and be informed.
Yes.
Because there are issues that seem to be more prevalent among men. And then if you go to communities of color, there are issues that are even more focused because that community of color, whether it's African American or Hispanic, there are shared experiences to our cultures. And so when you realize that, hey, I could go to a forum and just find out why am I sad all the time?
Yeah, and let me touch on, and I feel like I should say rather, but you know, if we choose our time and our thoughts and our mouth and our words and our delivery and vocabulary and words, you know, that we choose to use to bring ideas and thoughts together, if we start focusing our mind and our mouth on negativity, or you're saying to allow them to know the difference, why don't we, you know, and repeating what you said, why don't we continuously focus on good, happy, healthy, wealthy, and allow our coworker, our employee, our student, our kids in life to look at, hey, you know, there's going to be some personnel out there that are going to be mean to you. They might hurt you. They might lie to you. They might steal your money, you know. Well, I guess why would we, as men, focus on the down and the hurt and reasoning it on you know, knowing the difference? Why don't we focus on positive, happy,
one possibility
to the next level and allowing them on their own to see the corruption and the darkness and the mouth and the mind
Sure, and
of
so-
of an individual.
And that's where we really need each other. I may not know that I am exhibiting a certain behavior or mannerisms, but if you come alongside of me, Rudy, and say, hey bro, can we talk, man? I notice you're upset a lot. You know the language. So here's where the training, Cliff, that you and others have done, training helps us understand that certain behaviors are indicative that there's a problem somewhere. And then the importance, Rudy, of a man being able to come alongside, or a woman, as the case may be, come alongside. I didn't know that. I mean, I prayed for people for years, but I didn't understand it in this context, that I could better help individuals if I just understood, if I was just there to say, hey man, we're going to get through this together.
And I want to, before, because Cliff wanted to say something too. So the other thing I'd say is that from a therapeutic standpoint, we start with what could be wrong. How is it, are you having this? Is it wrong? And then how to fix it, or how to have some kind of corrective action to it. So, you know, it's like going to the doctor and saying, my leg really hurts, I can't walk on it. What, the doctor's going to examine it, right? And then he's going to say, you know what, I need a closer look at it. What might be the next step? The next step might be to take an x-ray. So the x-ray says, okay, this is wrong. The next step is, how do we fix it? And that's kind of the general progression that we like to do within Bro Talk. And so I don't want it to seem like we're focused on the negative, but we have to be able to see what it is so that we can see the positive for really what it's right, what it is, to be able to make sure that the positive overshines even the appearance of negative. A single light in darkness, a single candlelight in darkness can be seen from over a mile away, and that's really what I think in some sense what we're trying to do. Cliff?
Yeah, what I love about your model, it teaches that everybody has trauma, and we all have some of our own individual triggers that causes trauma. For instance, I have claustrophobia. You place me in a box, or like we were talking about an MRI, get me the hell out of here. I was placed in a box as a kid. I rolled the other kids in the cardboard box and didn't let them out. So when it was my turn, they kept me in there, and now I'm claustrophobic. But okay, so I understand the trauma, but the recovery is here. Dr. Gray's model is, okay, Cliff, you have claustrophobia. What can you do about it? I used to be a nicotine fiend and smoke cigarettes. What could I do about stopping the smoke? And so you change your focus. Here's where they're talking about recovery and what we call resilience from trauma. This is where you're going into, okay, how do I overcome this once I realize what things might be dragging me down or causing me problems? And so that's what I like about this slide. In NAMI, we have a program called Peer-to-Peer. And it's for people who, if you think you have an emotional condition, you don't have to have a diagnosis. It's totally free. It helps you to find out what your triggers are, but then it builds you a recovery plan. And it's using a lot of what Dr. Gray has on this thing of what is your vision for healthiness for you, and then you start building a specific plan to achieve your wellness. And that's what I like about this part, is you're getting people to talk, that it's not a sign of weakness to admit that we all have some things we may be scared of, or we've had trauma in our lives. Like I've had violence where my brother was killed with a sawed-off shotgun, and everybody here has had trauma. But then what are you going to do about it once you realize about it to help make yourself healthy? And that's where recovery and resilience comes in. That's all I wanted to say. But if NAMI San Antonio does have free courses called Peer-to-Peer, and it's like a 6-week course. It's outstanding for people who want to become more aware of their problems, their self-talk with themselves, and to have a better life and build a plan, a wellness recovery plan.
So we got a couple,
Thanks, Cliff.
couple questions here, and then David. and then we're gonna wrap up with some last thoughts.
So get you out of here.
I appreciate your statement, your question, and I'm just gonna answer that question in one word: acknowledgement. Because we cannot change what we first don't acknowledge. And so the reason why I appreciate that we have, and they're professionals, so they're gonna give you a lot of stuff, but just to keep it simple, acknowledgement. You cannot change what you don't acknowledge. And for a lot of people, even including myself, there's certain things, even talking to my supervisor, there's certain things that I'm working on to change, but I have to first acknowledge the fact that, oh, dang, okay. Like, for example, my communication. I can communicate something and talk to a group of people, and then what I communicate may be translated in a meaning or an understanding that is completely not what I want them to get from it, you know. And so I acknowledge that I have to work on how I communicate effectively in a way that my audience receives the message that I'm trying to convey, if that makes sense. So acknowledgement.
And before we get to David, I think this is one of the real things that I love about Bro Talk is that we have just this very thing happen on Bro Talk, where someone will ask a question and one of the other guys will give their perspective. And what happens now, through the interaction that we have, things begin to get a lot more clear. And ideally, I think, you know, what we're saying becomes important, but the community of the guys working together becomes equally or greater of importance, because now you know, hey, everybody's got a piece of something that'll make sense and overall help. So thank you guys both very, very much. David.
I'm going in a completely different tangent. I love what you're talking about here with Bro Talk. I know that you guys are virtual. Is there a future plan or any progressive plan to do things in person? Or, you know, in a setting where, you know, whether it be like a town hall forum type or a setting where, much like when we do our worship, there's a difference between watching it from live stream versus being in the church. Like, I can tell from hearing Rudy talk and Maynard talk and Cliff talk, that there was a different feel, and to your point, Doctor, there was this little pathway and clarity, that pathway to clarity. And so I don't know if I would have got that to as far as we did in just this 1 hour if I would have done this virtually, as I feel, you know, hence the question, the reason why I'm asking the question.
And so that is the reason that it's ongoing.
Amen.
Because sometimes, again, the value of that 1 hour is that men got to talk.
Yes.
And that's what isn't happening.
That's right.
Socially, culturally, men aren't talking. So even sometime in your circle of work, your peers may be going through something, but there's no conversation. Our hope is that we can create that hunger, that, man, I want to do something. And that's our hope. Hold on, I'm getting, yes, ma'am.
Well, we recently had a Bro Talk Live.
We did.
We had a Bro Talk Live, and it was 4 men from 4 churches came, and we had breakout sessions and all that. So you guys did already have like, hey,
Pastor Veronica Lou.
This is my wife. I was going to say that, baby. You just come in here and just.
So the answer is yes, we'll find more with our probably one every quarter.
That's fantastic.
And the Bro Talk Live was a lot of fun.
It was.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Well,
so much fun.
this was pretty fun, and so I can't even imagine.
Oh, yeah, we took a morning, had breakfast. Guys from different organizations, churches came together, and we spent a Saturday morning talking about issues like that. And Dr. Andy's just got the creative ability to take an important issue like mental health and relate it to giving your car a tune-up.
That's what we talked about.
And that was our theme that day. And it was great. And folks, you know, this is better than I could have anticipated. I really wish, you know, that we could continue to do that. I will say this, we are resuming Bro Talk in a couple of weeks. It'll be every second and fourth Monday night at 7 o'clock. It's from 7 to 8. I wish we had a slide that we could put the number up, but if you give me your contact information, I will make sure that we reach out to you and let you know when Bro Talk is. So last thoughts, we're gonna wrap up, and then if you have a question before we go, or comment, then we'd certainly love to give you a moment to just express anything that's on your heart. Billy, what are you thinking as we wrap up?
Well, I'd highly encourage you, if you haven't, to become a wellness champion. There's so much, there's a plethora of information that you get. Well, you become a wellness champion, but you get so much knowledge from it. One of the things I recall from the training was the last part of it was about schizophrenia. And in my mind, I just thought nobody could be cured of schizophrenia. I thought that was the way they would be. But there's actually, you can be cured from schizophrenia. I mean, you can come out of that. Wow. I had no idea. I just lack of knowledge. So I highly encourage you to take the training. It's great. It takes a while. I got pushed to the limit to get mine done, but it's definitely worthwhile. And so highly encourage you to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, my takeaway or thought I'd like to leave with you gentlemen is consider starting a Bro Talk. Because there are circles that I may not reach. You know, you guys probably didn't even know about Bro Talk. So, you know, imagine, Rudy, if you started something, you know, you need someone passion. Your passion, bro, is amazing. And I applaud your heart to want to get to solutions. Our community needs people just like you. Let's get to how we can get better. But alongside of you, Rudy, you need someone who knows the clinical, the professional side, or the next steps to take. Because if you, like we did, if we met someone and we could, that training that Billy was just talking about, helped me to be able to recognize suicidal tendency. This was not the ideation part, or just a person thinking about it. But this person was despondent and in deep depression, living in his car, no job. It was horrible. And that training helped me to recognize that, get him in care. And as they were reporting earlier, today that person is employed. Today that person has his own home, has his own transportation. It's his car. It's paid for. It's cash. He's not making monthly payments on it. He's not making monthly payments on his home. It's his place. His life is totally different today. And he still has moments when he regresses, and all we do is remind him of the progress. That's where you will be such a great, man, I'd love to be around someone who's always looking for answers. How do we get there? We need people like you, and our community needs forums where people can talk. So whether it's on Zoom, or whether it's in your church Bible study, or whether it's in a community center, man, the possibilities of awakening our communities with healthy men it's just amazing, the potential realities that we could experience. So, Dr. Andy, your last thoughts, sir?
I think I'm the kind of probably the wordy and nerdy one. I think about you know, there's an old book by Hemingway, and it's called For Whom the Bell Tolls, and he starts off, the preface of the book starts off the writings of John Donne, and John Donne said, you know, ask you not for whom the bell tolls for thee. And Donne's whole premise of the poem was that if the bell is tolling, it's tolling for someone dying, and if one person's dying, we're all diminished because of it. So we're all diminished at the death and the suffering of another person. And so for us, particularly as men, that's what we do. I think that Donne is expressing something that the Bible says, you know, I am my brother's keeper. And so being a community, being your brother's keeper, knowing that you are diminished by the suffering or the pain of another person, and reaching out to help them is what we try to do with Bro Talk.
This is every Monday that we have Dr. Andy this is what you're gonna get.
So, you know, he needs me to be like, yo, man, all right, let's chop this up. How do we make this? You know, but it's a great dynamic. You know, I'm thinking about a young man that Billy brought to Bro Talk. Somebody that he knew that was suicidal. He was in a bad way, y'all. He came on Bro Talk for weeks, never saw his face. We just saw the black screen and the name. And I don't know, a few months later, he comes on and he says, hey, my name is so-and-so. And I just got to tell you guys that 2 or 3 months ago, I was going to kill myself. And being here and being able to listen, he never said a word, never asked a question. But, and there are guys like that out there. They're not going to necessarily chime in, but just hearing that there's hope. This information changed this one young man's life, and we're seeing it over and over again, and we're looking for ways that we can spread this in our community. If there's anything that ought to go viral, it is this kind of information that will make our communities and families better. If we can get men, husbands, brothers, grandfathers, if we can get men better, so much good can come out of the change that we experience. So consider it. Start a Bro Talk. Get you a free Zoom account. Call a few friends, and you just never know. But when we resume, we'd love for you guys to join us. 2nd and 4th Monday nights, 7 o'clock. I can give you the Zoom ID, but if you leave me your email address, I will send an email to you with the information on the Bro Talks when they resume in the next couple of weeks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for attending. Bless you.